Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Adidas Adizero Boston 12. So before I dive into my review, let me preface this video as saying, I am more of your recreational runner. I am not gonna sit up here and pretend like I'm your marathon or your race guy. For my runners who need a review on this shoe for that context, you'll definitely wanna check out folks who are way more specific with their training. I am a lifter who likes to run. I would call my training a little bit more hybrid in nature. And so if you are somebody who's tackling anywhere from like 6 to 15-ish miles a week like myself, then this video I think will be a little bit more applicable to you. So 3 pros that I found with the Adizero Boston 12 is number 1, I like how lightweight the shoe is. So despite having a thicker stack height, so we have a 38mm stack height back here in the heel and a 31mm stack height up here in the forefoot, giving the shoe a drop of 7mm, it still remains pretty light, and that's because this textile upper is super breathable, the tongue is very lightweight, and the overall weight of this shoe is very light. So I think if you are somebody like myself who does kind of bias wanting that more lightweight running shoe for your mid-range, short range, and pickup runs, this can be a great option to explore. The second pro that I have with this shoe is I like the light strike midsole in this model and the energy rod. So I'm a very like forefoot, midfoot runner when I'm doing faster pace runs. And so a lot of my runs are pickups or interval runs to where I'm doing like 400 or 800 meter bouts at a slightly faster pace. So if you are a little bit more of a forefoot or midfoot striker in the shoe, this model I think should feed really well into that running context. But what I also like about this model is with this beveling of the heel and with this slightly thicker stack height, when I do my longer runs, I can adapt a bit more of a heel strike when I start to fatigue. This model feels pretty comfortable for all of those contexts. So overall, this model has been a pretty comfortable shoe for all of my running asks. And again, if you fall into that running category that I just explained, I think you'll also find this shoe to be plenty comfortable. The third pro that I have with this model is I like the overall structure of the upper. So this model feels pretty dang secure regarding its upper construction. So despite being lightweight, I like that it actually locks the foot down pretty well. And with this model's midfoot construction, the tongue doesn't feel super jarring, which I thought the Adizero Boston 11 could at times. So I like that they reworked the tongue to be a little bit softer, and I think it form fits the foot a little bit well, and you don't necessarily sacrifice any form of lateral or medial security on the shoe's upper with it being more lightweight. So I think if you're somebody that likes having a bit more midsole and structure to your upper construction while also having a shoe that's lightweight, that's where this model is going to excel. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the Adizero Boston 12. So 2 cons that I have with the Adizero Boston 12 is number 1, it can feel pretty dang narrow at times. And now with this shoe, it has a regular fit. We have a pretty aggressive taper up here through the toe box. Now, when I first put the shoe on, I was actually a little bit hesitant in it because it did feel super snug, but I've since transitioned to thinner socks and it's been pretty solid across the board. And after about 2 weeks of use, this has broken in a little bit more regarding the mesh and giving you a little bit more room. But all that said, I think if you are somebody that has like a double E width foot or wider, you're gonna wanna pass on this shoe. I have an E width foot, and I would say that's kind of pushing that upper echelon regarding how the shoe is gonna interact for certain foot widths. If you're similar with your foot width, you could probably get by, but I think the shoe will definitely be a little bit more biased towards like narrow, medium, and maybe slightly wider feet if you have like an E width foot like myself. Another con that I have with this model is kind of contextual, and it's not necessarily a pure knock against the shoe's performance, but if you're that person that wants a running shoe for also cross training and some light lifting, I would say pass on the shoe and use something else. With this model, you do have a good amount of toe spring and heel beveling, so it's not going to be the best model for forms of cross training. So for example, track workouts where you might be doing some dumbbell lunges, some kettlebell swings, some kettlebell snatches, basically any form of like metabolic circuit work. I'm not a big fan of this shoe. Plus you get a ton of compression with this midsole. So I don't think it's going to be your best running shoe to kind of be that all-in-one style shoe for cross training, light lifting, etc. So not necessarily a knock against the shoe, but you'll definitely, I think, want to save this shoe for running, and then maybe some walking here and there if you really want to wear them for walking, but I would say probably save them for running because you'll get more out of the durability doing so. But all that said, let's talk about the performance of the Adizero Boston 12. I have enjoyed this model a lot. I think it's a stronger model than the Boston 11, but let's talk performance now. So to chat on the performance of the Adizero Boston 12, I'll discuss how the shoe performs for short and mid-range runs. So that's any run from 400 meters to 6 miles. I am not going to talk about long distance runs in the shoe. I'm not going to be that reviewer that pretends that he knows how the the shoe performs in that context when I haven't used them in that context. I'll also talk about how the shoe performs for cross training, and then also some walking and just casual wear. So in the context of short runs, I have thoroughly enjoyed this shoe. I like that I can sprint in it, I like that it's lightweight, and I like that the midsole is accommodating for a bunch of different types of foot strikes. I do think it's a little bit more biased towards forefoot and midfoot strikers. However, with this beveled heel and with this thicker midsole, I don't find it overly uncomfortable when I am heel striking a little bit more when I'm fatigued. I also like that you have the Continental rubber on this model's outsole. It gives you a little bit more grip, and honestly, my Adizero Boston 11 has held up really well regarding its outsole construction, and so far in the 12, I'm seeing a similar level of durability, so I think it should last for most folks. Now, I will say you do have some exposed foam here, so definitely keep an eye on that. So if you're running through puddles and dirt, you'll definitely want to clean this out when you get home just to avoid any accumulation or water and stuff breaking down this foam over time and accelerating the breakdown of the shoe. But overall, for my running needs, this model has been really solid, and I think if you're somebody who does like a little bit more support in your midsole and you want a breathable upper construction, this shoe will excel. And so if you're running in hotter climates, for example, that's also where I think this shoe should excel as well. With colder climates, I'm actually really curious how this shoe is going to perform in the winter, because I like to wear thicker socks because my feet tend to get cold really easily, and I'm nervous that I'm actually going to lose out on some of the feel or fit of the shoe for that matter with that thicker sock, because I'm already kind of pushing the width in this model's toe box. When it comes to cross training, I would say pass on this shoe. This is not going to be your running shoe, I think, for most cross training settings. Can you do body weight work in this model? For sure. Can you do basic plyos like pogos? For sure. However, if you're going to be loading this model in any form when it comes to like dumbbells, kettlebells, barbells, I think you're not going to enjoy the overall stability of this shoe. It is a pure running shoe, so try to leave its use for that. And also with the toe spring and the beveling of the heel and with this midsole, I don't think you're going to have enough stability to really be effective with this shoe with your lifting context. When it comes to daily wear and walking, the shoe is comfortable, but what I will say is, despite being comfortable, I would say this is definitely a running shoe that you'll want to preserve for mostly running if you want to get the most out of them, because with walking, you have this exposed foam here. You might break this down a little bit quicker, but then also with its upper construction, I just think it might feel a little bit uncomfortable over time if you're doing longer walks, because it does feel a tiny bit limiting in the context of upper volume and width. So definitely food for thought there. If you have a narrow foot width or you're not really worried about the durability, definitely wear them for walking. They should be comfortable, but I would say they're definitely not my favorite shoe for kind of walking that fine line between being good for walking and just running errands and wearing out and about, and then also running. This is definitely a more running biased shoe in my opinion, and if you're going to use them for walking, just expect that you might break them down a little bit quicker than what you're after. To chat on the price of the Adizero Boston 12, you can expect to pay $160. Now, is that price point fair for this shoe? I think it is, especially if you are somebody who's going to be primarily using these for running. These have been stellar for those asks, and that's why I also suggest trying to limit their use for daily wear or basically any form of inclement weather that can break down this midsole. Since you are paying a little bit more for this model compared to other running shoes, I definitely want you to get the most out of them, but $160 if you're using the shoe specifically for running, I think is fair for the overall performance that I've had with this model. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the Adizero Boston 12? Number one, I think if you're like me and you want that shoe for a bunch of different types of running, and again, like I am not going to be your long distance guy, this model works really well. I think if you're a lifter who wants that shoe that's a bit more supportive and you plan to do a little bit of a varied mileage with your runs on a weekly basis, this shoe is very consistent and it feels really solid. I like the heel to toe drop, I like the feel, and I like the responsiveness that you get with the forefoot and the energy rods in this shoe. The second context is if you have a narrow or medium foot width. Again, can this model fit for slightly wider feet? Yes. However, I do think the shoe is going to be definitely more biased towards a medium foot width and even narrower feet at that. So if that is your ask with your running shoes, this shoe should work really well for your foot anatomy. And then the third context where I think this shoe makes a lot of sense is if you want a lightweight shoe that has a lot of breathability for hotter climates, that's also where the Adizero Boston 12 is going to excel. The mesh upper has a ton of breathability, and with its lightweight construction, the shoe has an overall good amount of ventilation. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you have wide feet, steer clear of this model. I don't think you're gonna have enough room in the toe box regarding the taper, and also the upper volume can feel a little bit low at times too. So if you have a thicker foot, that could also be problematic regarding the shoe sizing. The second context where I think you're gonna wanna pass on this shoe is if you want that running shoe, once again, for walking, for some cross training, for some light strength sessions here and there, so at the track and whatnot, this model might not be the best pick. It's a little bit more running focused. It's not gonna give you that more generalist feel that other running shoes can have. So that would definitely be something to consider with this model as well, because with this this thicker midsole, you're gonna have a lot of compression. You're not gonna have the most stability for any form of like loaded strength work if that's something you're trying to blend with your running workouts. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Adizero Boston 12, I've alluded to it a little bit already in this video, but I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. And now to elaborate a little bit further, narrow, medium width, and even slightly wider feet should be safe going true to size in this shoe. Again, I have an E-width foot. This model is probably pushing it regarding its width for me. I make them work and they've grown to be comfortable because I've broken them over time with this mesh. But if you have wider feet, if you have feet that are a little bit flatter, this might not be the best option for you. Also, it doesn't have a ton of upper volume, so that could also be problematic for higher arches and thicker feet, so food for thought there. But I think most folks should be safe going true to size in the shoe. And if you've ever worn the previous Adizero Boston models, especially the 11, because that's a model that I've worn to pretty much death now, the 12 fits very similar. I actually think the upper gives you a little bit more room because it's a lighter weight. It feels like it stretches a little bit better over time, but true to size again should be the move for most. All right, so now let's talk about the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Adizero Boston 12. So for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of just about like 9.65 ounces. This model's heel to toe drop is 7 millimeters. The stack height at the heel is 38, and the stack height at the forefoot is 31. And then this model does have a thin foam removable insole, but since this shoe doesn't have a ton of upper volume, you might want to go for a different model if you have a thicker insole that you're trying to put into your shoe. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the Adizero Boston 12. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole area that comes up with that continental rubber. And then looking at the upper of this shoe, we have a mesh upper throughout with some synthetic and textile overlays around the toe box up here and then through the midfoot. The boot doesn't have a ton of structure, so again, if you like a little bit more rigidity or structure to your upper, this might not be the best model for you, especially in the context of ankle support. Looking at the midsole in the shoe, you have the light strike foam throughout the entirety of this midsole, and then you also have the energy rods built into the midfoot of the shoe. This is designed to help you limit energy loss when you are running. Looking at the outsole, you have this rubber tread patterning here on the heel going through the midfoot into the forefoot. This is a continental rubber, and again, you do have some exposed foam here, so keep an eye on this if you're going to be running in inclement weather or wearing this out and about for daily wear. Looking at the midfoot in this shoe, you have 6 core eyelets that go up, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with the 7th back here for lace lock. The tongue itself doesn't really have a gusset to it, and that can be kind of a pain point at times. You do have a little bit of a gusset here on the medial side, but the lateral side doesn't. So when I find myself having to unlace and lace the shoe, I do have to kind of fight the tongue at times to lay it flat. It's a small problem. It doesn't really move a ton once it's laced, but it definitely might take a little bit more time to get on than other running shoes you might be used to. We also have a loop here for security, and the laces themselves are pretty thin, and I haven't had many issues with them coming undone. They do run a tiny bit long in my opinion though, so I will tuck them if I'm running and they are kind of flopping around. The heel back here does have a tab in which you can fold down for your running purposes to limit this rub on the Achilles, which I also really like. But overall though, that's pretty much the gist of this shoe's construction. If you have additional questions on any of the specs of this model, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Adidas Adizero Boston 12. Honestly, as I get more into running, it's been really fun to test different shoes and start to learn the bias between different running models. Again, I'm not your marathon guy. Find a running channel that's way more specific for that context with folks who are doing some sick running feats on a weekly basis. But if you are like myself and you're much more recreational in nature, hopefully this video was able to give you some thoughts and direction on the shoe and if it's worth it for you. If you have additional questions on the Adizero Boston 12, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.